So what happened to the New York Knicks? Well, James Dolan bought them. But seriously, the New York Knicks were at one point one of the most decorated franchises in the entire NBA. With stars like Willis Reed, Walt Frazier, Patrick Ewing, and many others, the Knicks were well respected throughout most of the 20th century. But now, they are quite literally a dumpster fire. Bad mistake after bad mistake put this team in a downward spiral that they may never be able to rebound from. The Knicks haven't made the playoffs in 7 years. So you're probably wondering how we got here.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Well, in 1999, something changed for the worse. And its name is James Dolan. Since James Dolan has become the owner of the New York Knicks in the 1999-2000 NBA season, the Knicks have had just 5 winning seasons to this day, and one of them was during a shortened season due to the lockout. In James Dolan's first season as the Knicks owner, the Knicks went 50-32 under coach Jeff Van Gundy. The year prior, the Knicks advanced to the NBA Finals, led by star center Patrick Ewing. However, this year, the Knicks advanced to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they lost to Reggie Miller and the Indiana Pacers, who went on to lose to the Lakers. But from this year on, everything went downhill for the Knicks, as this was the last time the Knicks had made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. The following season, Patrick Ewing was traded to the Seattle Supersonics. While Ewing wasn't in his prime form anymore, he was still the face of the franchise, and losing him was devastating as he was an icon. The Knicks went 48-34, only to lose in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs to the Toronto Raptors. This was a very old Knicks team, where their youngest player was 26-year-old Marcus Camby. That's insane. In 2001-2002, the Knicks were terrible and finished with a 30-52 record, but instead of entering rebuild mode and blowing it up before the 2002-2003 season, the Knicks chose to trade Marcus Camby, Mark Jackson, and the rights of Nene for an injury-prone Antonio McDyess, who would go on to miss all of his first season with the Knicks. The Knicks would overpay other veterans this same season, and this would cause salary problems for years to come. As if it wasn't bad enough for the Knicks, the following season they would hire Isiah Thomas. During the Isiah Thomas era, from the beginning of 2002 to the end of 2008, the Knicks had an outstanding 155-304 record. Thomas and the Knicks had an absurdly high payroll, yet were consistently one of the worst teams in the league. Notably, Isiah Thomas traded role players and young pieces along with future first-round picks, one of which ended up being Gordon Hayward for Stephon Marbury, who, although he averaged a lot of points for the Knicks for a few years, he ended his career in China, so I think that pretty much sums it up. Marbury ate up a lot of the Knicks' cap space for a long time and limited their flexibility in free agency. Somehow the Knicks made the playoffs as the 7th seed in 2004, despite a losing record. Although they got swept by the Nets in the first round, the Knicks were kinda on their way back up. In 2005, the Knicks traded for Eddie Curry and Antonio Davis for Tim Thomas, Michael Sweetney, and picks that would turn into LaMarcus Aldridge and Joakim Noah. Entering the 2005-2006 season with the highest payroll in the league, the Knicks would finish the year 23-59. That's absurd. The Knicks would buy out Larry Brown, their coach at the time, for $18.5 million, and Isiah Thomas would take over as head coach. If you thought things couldn't get worse for the Knicks, you couldn't be more wrong. In the 2007 offseason, Isiah Thomas was found guilty of sexual harassment. Dolan still wouldn't fire him. He was so loyal to Isiah Thomas. Thomas's problem wasn't that he couldn't find talented players. It was that he couldn't find players who worked well together on the court. That was really what made him both a terrible coach and a terrible GM. Knicks fans became furious, and "Fire Isiah" chants echoed throughout Madison Square Garden.
We need to fire Isiah as soon as possible and get somebody who knows how to manage a team and put this team where we need to be.
After 2 below-average seasons, the Knicks make yet again another mistake. Carmelo Anthony verbally expressed that he wanted out of Denver, and he wanted to play for the Knicks. At the deadline, the Knicks were involved in a massive 3-team trade where they received Carmelo Anthony and Chauncey Billups, but also traded away Danilo Gallinari, Wilson Chandler, and 2 future first-round picks that turned into Jamal Murray and Dario Saric. On paper, that doesn't look like a terrible trade for the Knicks by any means, but Melo was going to be a free agent the following offseason. The Knicks did not need to trade for him as Melo was desperately trying to make his way over to the Big Apple. So the team around Melo suffered because of this trade. With Melo on the team in the second half of the 2010-2011 season, the Knicks managed a 42-40 record, where they lost in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs to the Boston Celtics. But for once, the Knicks were actually promising. This is their first winning record since the 2000-2001 season. With Melo, the Knicks made it to the playoffs in his first 3 seasons, even advancing as far as the Eastern Conference semifinals, with a core of Carmelo Anthony, Tyson Chandler, and Amari Stoudemire, with young pieces like Iman Shumpert and J.R. Smith. But this was during the Big 3 Miami Heat era, so the Knicks were unable to make the NBA Finals that Knicks fans were so hungry for. In 2012, Linsanity struck, and Jeremy Lin brought some hope to New York with his dynamic play style. Lin was one of the best point guards we had in a long time, and he very well could have been a big piece moving forward. However, Carmelo Anthony was jealous of Lin and was a big reason that Lin was not re-signed by the organization. However, things were still looking up for the Knicks entering the 2013-2014 season. After finishing with 54 wins, Melo being the league's leading scorer, and an unfortunate loss to the Pacers in the semis, the Knicks looked for one last title push. However, the Knicks started the season awful and finished with 38 wins and no playoffs. In addition to this, a big reason the Knicks started to regress following the 2012-2013 season was a result of Amari Stoudemire's injury issues. Amari had knee issues and his play was beginning to regress. And now, we enter the Phil Jackson era. Jackson decided to clean house by firing the entire coaching staff. The coaching staff that had built a very solid roster and was consistently making the playoffs. And what did he replace them with? Derek Fisher and Steve Mills.
The gang's all here. Oh!
Jackson's biggest mistakes include giving Melo a no-trade clause, trading away Raymond Felton and Tyson Chandler for Shane Larkin, Jose Calderon, Samuel Dalembert, and Wayne Ellington, along with 2 picks for the 2014 NBA Draft. Granted, I understand what Jackson was trying to do. Tyson Chandler and Raymond Felton were not very cheap, and he was trying to clear cap space. But come on. Jose Calderon? In 2015, under Jackson, the Knicks had their worst season in franchise history, with a record of 17-65. In this draft, Jackson made the only successful move of his time in New York, drafting big man Kristaps Porzingis, and even this received lots of hate. Granted, Porzingis proved himself. To end off his reign in New York, Jackson drafted French point guard Frank Ntilikina over players like Donovan Mitchell and Bam Adebayo. Add in the fact that Jackson had public conflicts with Porzingis and tried to buy out Carmelo, the Knicks decided to fire Phil Jackson. To make matters worse, the Knicks replaced Jackson with Steve Mills. Mills' first move as president was in trading away Carmelo Anthony to the Oklahoma City Thunder. This wasn't a terrible move, as Melo was beginning to regress, but he was the heart and soul of this Knicks team for the better part of the decade, and he was a fan favorite, so it was definitely tough to see him go. In return, the Knicks got Enes Kanter and Doug McDermott, neither of which are still on the team. The same year, the Knicks brought back Tim Hardaway Jr. on an absurd 4-year, $71 million contract. After a 29-53 season, the Knicks parted ways with Jeff Hornacek. Then, the Knicks hired the abomination that is David Fizdale. In 2.5 years, Fizdale went 21-83 with a 20% win percentage.
Take that for data.
In the 2018 NBA Draft, the Knicks selected Kevin Knox over other players, including Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Michael Porter Jr. Even Miles and Mikal Bridges were better. Troy Brown as well. Almost every person taken after Knox was better than him, yet we somehow messed this up. But hey, at least we lucked out and selected Mitchell Robinson in the second round, who does have lots of potential and may even become our rim protector of the future. Midway through the 2018-2019 season, the Knicks sadly traded Kristaps Porzingis, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Courtney Lee in exchange for DeAndre Jordan, Dennis Smith Jr., and Wesley Matthews, as well as a 2021 first and a 2023 first. This was an attempt to clear cap, as the Knicks were confident in their future in free agency, as KD and Kyrie Irving were rumored to link up in New York, which they did, but not with the Knicks. At least this Knicks still got Zion, right? Nope, we lost the lottery. I mean, RJ isn't that bad, but come on, we went 17 and 65 for that? I love RJ, but we missed out on Zion and Ja. But hey, at least we got Julius Randle. Wayne Ellington?
Ellington puts up a three short going here tonight. Here's Ellington.
How about Reggie Bullock?
And that's something they want to be better at. The Knicks here, though, feeling like they can increase the pace. Here's Bullock. With that.
Well, Bobby Portis must have been a star after we paid him $15 million. No? Well, what about Elfrid Payton? Maybe former Bulls legend? No, not him. Taj Gibson! Okay, maybe legend was too nice. Well, at least we can build around Alonzo Trier.
I'm gonna kill myself! Wow. I'm going to kill myself, and it's your fault!